Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for an MP webinar covering the engaging and retaining your remote workforce proven strategies. I'm Katie Kreider, Marketing Specialist here at MP. For those of you joining us on a webinar for the first time, MP is a full-service human capital management company. We offer a complete suite of products and services to support organizations through the entire employee lifecycle, including recruiting, HR, payroll, benefits administration, time and attendance, and compliance assistance. We support our clients with cutting-edge technical solutions, as well as proactive, reliable service and deep HR and payroll expertise. At MP, we are wired for HR and help our clients succeed by aligning their people strategy with their business goals. I'm excited to introduce your presenter for today's program, Sam Roblin Edelman. Sam has been passionate about a company culture from day one. She started her career as a consultant, then moved to the business development and communication teams for wellness startups. As the general manager of ZogCulture, Sam combines her business experience with her love of building deeper connections in the workplace. Sam also is one of 6 members of the Zog Life Management Team, which drives national strategy across ZogCulture and Zog Sports. Her favorite job is being mom to her 20-month-old daughter, Mia. She's the eternal optimist and loves a good icebreaker. She calls them connection games. Sam received her BA from the University of Rochester in Industrial and Organizational Psychology and certificate in Holistic Health from the Institute of Integrated Nutrition. ZogCulture serves as the events partner for hundreds of organizations, ranging from startups to Fortune 500 companies. Clients seek their expertise when they need help planning creative events to enhance interpersonal connections, connect a dispersed workforce, and increase employee engagement. The company uses play to create more productive and positive connections within corporations by hosting in-person events such as field days and summer picnics, as well as virtual events which allow companies to hold professional, engaging, and high production experiences for their remote workforce. Whether your office is in person, virtual, or hybrid, ZogCulture is a partner who can help transform your company into a place people want to work. For more about ZogCulture and their offerings, visit www.zogculture.com. Just a few housekeeping issues before we get started here today. If you'd like to submit a question during the program, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen. And as a quick legal disclaimer, this training is intended for educational and informational purposes. While we hope you learn a lot today, the information should not be construed as legal advice, and we will be sending out the recording of the webinar later today along with the slides. And with that, I'm going to hand the mic off to Sam.
Great. Thank you, MP, for your introduction. We are proud to be working with MP as our HR, payroll, and benefits partner and are thrilled to be here today. So thank you, MP, and thank you to everybody who has taken time out of your day to be here. If you're on the East Coast, I hope you're staying cool, and I hope everyone's having a great summer so far. So as mentioned, we are ZogCulture. Our mission is to create connections and build community in the workplace. I want to also mention that we're the sister company to Zog Sports, which shares a mission of creating connection and building community and does that through recreational sports leagues. So today's presentation is focused on engaging and retaining your remote workers. So we're approaching the topic through a bit of a different lens. We believe that the most important tool to engage and retain your remote workers is play. You heard that right. We realize that many people do not associate play with work. Though we're here to challenge that assumption. We're here to challenge that business and play, they don't need to remain separate. In fact, today's presentation will go through a handful of categories and provide specific tactics that create engagement and retain top talent by using play in the workforce. So in today's presentation, we'll cover the following: The first are tips to incorporate play into remote work. As part of this, we'll share a framework for thinking about what play means to your employees. And this will give you tactical ways of incorporating play in your day-to-day experience as well as through your events strategy. The next category we'll cover is making your meetings more remote friendly, which is in fact a skill. We'll talk about forming a culture committee and the importance of that. We'll talk about tips for making your onboarding more engaging and why onboarding matters. And lastly, we'll come back to ZogCulture's bread and butter, which is focused on ideas for fun and engaging events for your remote employees. So let's jump right in. The first topic we're going to start with are tips to incorporate play into the remote experience. And the first tip is to start meetings with play itself. As mentioned above and in the intro, we're here to challenge the notion that business and play need to be separate. We believe that in order to have effective business conversations, employees must feel connected first. So starting a meeting with play is one way of creating that connection up front. Therefore, tip number one is to start meetings with playful connection moments. To do this, we recommend spending first, 1 to 5 minutes or so of a meeting focused on playful connection prompts. Some of our favorites are listed on this slide. So questions like, what did you do for fun when you were 10 years old? Or name one thing that brings you joy. Or you're allowed to list only one skill on your resume. What is it? ZogCulture actually has a list of 52 prompts, think like a card, a deck of playing cards, that we use on a rotating basis internally. So we're constantly learning about our colleagues and connecting in playful ways before jumping into the meeting topic. Many of these prompts are actually backed in research by folks like Adam Grant. If I could see the room, maybe I'd see some of you nodding if you're familiar with him, an organizational psychologist and professor at Wharton, as well as Tim Ferriss, who's a New York Times bestselling author. And these prompts are actually proven to scientifically create deeper connection. I will say you're also encouraged to use prompts that best suit your mood of the day. And if you're looking for something even more light and fun, you may want to do a prompt like, what's your favorite breakfast food? Or what's a highlight from your weekend? Or how do you like your eggs cooked? That's one of our team's favorites. So once you decide on which connection prompt you'd like to use to kick off the meeting, there are some tips that can make this an effective practice. So the first is to add the connection moment to the meeting agenda itself and to make it time bound. So to me, this is one of the most important ways that we can start meetings with connection prompts and to make it an effective practice. By adding it to the agenda itself, it tells meeting participants that this is something that is valued. And it makes sure that it's prioritized. The other thing it does is it creates a time-bound period for this so that it doesn't go too long, but does create a sense of connection before jumping into the meeting topic. The next tip is to send questions in advance. So in the spirit of inclusion, which is something that we talk about a lot, both internally within Zog and externally with our clients, we want to encourage you to, when using connection prompts, to give people time to prepare if that's something that they feel more comfortable with. That's this way that they're not put on the spot and they may have some time to reflect beforehand if that's the way that they best communicate. The third is more of a general Zoom tip, but if it's a larger group, encourage sharing through the Zoom chat rather than inviting folks to unmute themselves. What this does is it still creates great energy. It still creates a way for people to get to know each other, But it doesn't take away from the meeting topic at hand, because frankly, going around a large group and asking a larger group to share may take up too much time, whereas sharing via the chat may accomplish what you're looking to achieve, which is connection and play at the top of a meeting. And then lastly is prepare folks for a round robin if you decide to do a round robin in your meeting. Some of you may be asking, what is a round robin? This is another tip for engaging remote work experience. A round robin, essentially, for the purposes of a meeting, is when everybody gets a chance to go around and share. So it's going around the room if you were in person, or going around the Zoom meeting if you're virtual. What we recommend if you're doing a round robin in a remote meeting is to actually let people know the order in which the round robin will go. So for example, you may want to go alphabetical order. And so I would say, we're going to do a round robin. I'm going to start. So the next person in the alphabet after me will go next. And that way, again, thinking about inclusion, people aren't put on the spot and have a chance to prepare. This next slide provides additional tips for incorporating play into the remote experience, which I'll take us through. So first, it's, in addition to starting your meetings with a connection prompt, the next here is being intentional about hosting virtual events. Later in today's presentation, we'll go into some specific virtual event ideas and virtual games that you may want to consider. Though one recommendation is to give your employees a chance to lead their own virtual sessions based on their interests. So as an example, at our own company at Zog, we have an employee who is an expert meme maker. Yeah, that is a thing, to be really, really good at making memes. And she led the company through a training on how to create a meme. Another example is a client of ours hosts a monthly employee-led cooking/baking class where folks share recipes from their cultures and upbringings. So what this accomplishes is not just giving employees a leadership opportunity and a chance to get to know their colleagues in that way, but it also gives employees the chance to share a little bit more about themselves. And we've heard really great feedback from our clients. They've been doing this. One particular client has been doing this for over a year on a monthly basis. The next tip is to use the messaging platforms that currently exist as a way to incorporate play. So you may use Slack, you may use Teams, you may use something else. But at the end of the day, the intent here is to include play in what you're already doing. So some specific ways that you can incorporate play into your messaging platform is one through channels. This is a really great way that we see across the board as a playful way for everyday playful communication. So some channel ideas that we've seen both internally and with our clients: pet lovers channel, a sports lovers channel, a fun channel. And what's great about many of these is it gives people the chance to opt in if it's a category that they're interested in. There are some channels that you may want to open up for the whole company, like the fun channel, because who doesn't like to see a little bit of fun in their day? One tip is, if any of these playful channels do start to become a tad overwhelming because there's so much fun being included, there are ways you can, quote, mute the channel, and therefore check it only when you have a minute or looking for a break in your day. A few other tips about creating play through your technology and messaging platforms are: always celebrate wins, both small and large, in all channels, and to use core values as a way of giving feedback and shout outs. So lastly, the last tip here on incorporating play into the remote work experience is to be intentional about in-person gatherings. And I realize that this topic of today's webinar is to talk about how to engage remote employees. So I do want to acknowledge it's a bit of an elephant in our remote room, but there may be times when gathering in person is useful even when your employees are remote. So a few specific ways that you can do this, even when your employees are remote, are one, if your folks live in the same geographic area, encourage them to gather for happy hours or in-person meetings when it makes sense to do so. If possible, we've seen the most success when this happens about once a month. The next tip is if you have a group of people who are permanently remote, maybe they moved to a different state, maybe for personal reasons they've decided to stay home indefinitely. And if you have a group of people who are in the same area, our recommendation is this: consider hosting 2 simultaneous experiences, one for the in-person crew and one for the virtual crew, so that neither feels like they're getting the short end of the stick. So as an example, we had a client a few weeks back who decided to host an in-person field day. Well, 70% of their employees attended in person, 30% remained remote. For those 30%, we hosted a virtual game called ZogOlympics, happy to share more on that later, so that the virtual folks had a chance to play and connect in a different yet similar way to the folks who were in person. So just because you decide to plan an in-person event, or just because you decide to plan a virtual event, does not mean that you can't do something just as incredible for the group where the event is not being hosted. So with that, we'll move on to our next category. Oh, actually, we'll move on to the next supporting piece of information on how to incorporate play into the remote work experience. So at the top of the meeting, when I went through the agenda, I shared that we would be including a framework for thinking about what play means to your employees. What you see here are the 8 different play personalities that were first introduced by Dr. Stuart Brown. So Dr. Stuart Brown is the leading expert in researching the role of play in fueling happiness and intelligence throughout our lives. He actually released a book that's called Play: How It Shapes the Brain, Opens the Imagination, and Invigorates the Soul. And in his book, he unpacks how understanding these 8 play personalities can help us connect and work better with people. So this slide has images that represent each play personality, which I'll briefly take you through. So as I take you through these, my challenge for you all is to think about which play personality do you most identify with, and also to think about which play personalities are you seeing throughout your company. Then once we take you through it, the next thought exercise is, how can you better engage different play personalities in the workplace? So the first play personality is the director. The director is the person who might enjoy planning the team outing even more than the outing itself. They're detail-oriented, list makers, box checkers, people who get real joy from bringing people together and directing the experience from front to end. So as an example, Steve Jobs may identify as a director, or Sheryl Sandberg or Elon Musk, someone who really likes to take a leadership role and create a director experience. This second play personality is the artist or the creator. So the artist is someone, or creator is someone who plays by making things. You can count on this person to have the best decorations, they're tactile, and they love turning ideas into tangible things, maybe even through arts and crafts. Michelangelo may associate with being an artist or creator as a way for play. Number 3 is the kinesthetic. So this person is always active, always doing something, always in motion. So whether they're dancing or swimming or playing sports or just taking a walk, this person plays by moving. One example of a way that you could tap into this play personality for your workplace would be by offering a sports team to your employees. Another way would be by encouraging them to take walking meetings, or something along the lines that gets them moving and actually out of their home office. The fourth play personality is the joker. So this person is the one who's always laughing and always makes other people laugh. Play to them is watching comedy, cracking jokes with friends, anything that gets the giggles going. Tina Fey, maybe a joker, Will Ferrell. Number 5 is the competitor. The competitor loves to win. This kind of person finds a way to raise the stakes on just about anything. So for example, adding fun by introducing a contest or a competition to the most mundane of tasks. Oftentimes on sales teams, there may be the competitor play personalities, teams that are looking to, track goals and set goals and, perhaps maybe at the end have a celebration if they accomplish that, competitive goal that they set. Number 6 is the collector. So the collector gets joy from finding, gathering, sorting, and collecting things. Think about someone who maybe as a kid collected stamps. This person, they find joy in collecting objects and experiences. Number 7 is the storyteller. So storytellers are imaginative and love to be creative, but in a very different way from the artist creator. So for them, play is everything from music to theater to writing, and all are ways that the storyteller can craft new stories. An example of an activity you may want to explore with the storyteller is something like improv or writing a book or a newspaper article as a team. And then lastly, number 8 is the explorer. So the explorer loves to see new places, people, things. They love to see the world. Typically extroverted, this person seeks newness and novelty, craving that fun feeling of adventure. An example of an activity that the explorer may be most interested in might be a scavenger hunt, as an example. So I just took you through these 8 play personalities to give you a framework to think about how people play differently in the workplace. So I started with these questions, but I'll end with them just to give you a moment to reflect. The first is, what play personality do you most relate to? It's possible that you relate to 1, 2, 3, maybe 7, or even all of them. But it's a chance to self-reflect. The second is, as you think about these play personalities and your current employees, your current company culture, ask yourself, which of these play personalities do you think are most represented in the company culture you've created in the remote working world? Have you planned events? Have you done only cooking classes? And if so, that might more speak to the artist or creator. Have you done competitive team building games? That might speak more to the competitor. So it's a chance to reflect on where you're focusing your energy and where you may want to do more so that you can be inclusive of the different play personalities. All right, moving on to this next section. We'll now talk about remote-friendly meetings. At this point, we've all become perhaps pros, since it has been over 2 years of being pretty much in a remote-friendly world. Some of us may have been in a remote-friendly world pre-pandemic. Some of us, this may be new. But we do want to acknowledge that it's not easy. Toxic meeting cultures have been a challenge for companies both before, during, and post, dare we call it that, pandemic. And we found that hosting effective remote meetings is in fact a skill in and of itself and takes work. That said, across all of our clients, we have seen that when companies do meetings right, especially for remote employees, they're more likely to engage and retain top talent. So here are some of our top tips with the intention of making this as tangible as possible for you to walk away to improve your remote-friendly meetings. So the first is to send a meeting objective and agenda in advance. I can't reiterate this enough, and actually this came about when we've seen it amongst our clients, but I've had a leader who I've worked with in the past who actually would not even attend a meeting if the objective and agenda was not set in advance. And at the time, it was hard for me to understand that. But what I understand now, and what we've learned, especially in the remote world, is that by setting an objective and agenda in advance, it gives people the chance to opt out of a meeting if it's not relevant for them, and also gives them a chance to opt in and really lean in if the topic is something that they absolutely need to be there for. Another suggestion for the meetings is to provide individual think time as well as group think time. So by providing the meeting objective and agenda in advance, it gives people the chance to reflect on key prompts or key questions or key areas on their own, so that when they come together as a group, again, they may be more prepared, or they may feel more psychologically safe to speak because they've had that time to prepare in advance. This next one is so key, and there's actually some recent research coming out about this, coming out daily, because again, this world of being remote friendly or remote first is relatively new. But evaluate the need for video. Not all remote meetings need to be video meetings. I'll repeat that. Not all virtual meetings need to be video meetings. So actually, I pulled some specific research that came out from the University of Georgia, and it shared that it's cameras, not Zoom, which are causing fatigue. So some tips to combat this are: for one-on-one meetings, offer walking or phone conversations rather than Zoom meetings. I, for one, have pretty much set a rule, unless there is a reason for a video meeting, to have one-on-one meetings without video, to give people a chance to take a break from their screen time. 2 is encourage employees to have what we call, quote unquote, video off days. Ask leaders to lead by example so they too have video off days. Create the space to make it okay for somebody to say, you know, I'm here today, just wanted to let you know that I'll be having my video off today. And then the third tip that we can use to evaluate the need for video is just evaluate the need for video and ask yourself if videos are needed. So as an example, videos may be needed if you are sharing your screen or if you are collaborating on a document. But if it's, again, a one-on-one meeting that video does not serve a purpose, give people the chance to know that in advance. 2 last tips here regarding remote-friendly meetings. 1 is make meetings on Fridays, or I should say make Fridays meeting lists. This is something we've implemented at Zog, and it has been a tremendous value add for our culture, because it gives people the chance on Fridays to catch up on their work, to be heads down, and to do what it is that they need to do that they may have not gotten time to do in the week. So creating this as a company policy has created a remote world where people can be more intentional about how they spend their time throughout the week. And then lastly, quarterly reevaluate your meeting rhythms. Meetings are part of a company's culture and part of a company's strategy. So like any strategic initiative, we need to be agile with how we approach meetings. What's working? What's not working? Does every meeting that we have scheduled on a recurring basis need to happen? You may be surprised as you look at your calendar with a different lens, as you reevaluate the efficacy, playfulness, and overall quality of your meetings, that you may not need to have all the meetings that you have. You may have different meetings that aren't happening that you'd want to reevaluate. So the point here is to be agile and open-minded to change when it comes to your meeting cadence and strategy. So speaking of, before we move on to the next topic, I want to pause. I'd like to give everyone 30 seconds or so to take a stretch break, take a deep breath in, stand up, wave your hands in the air, lean side to side, whatever it is that will help you feel more refreshed so that this remote-friendly meeting is as playful and as remote-friendly as we hope our internal meetings are. Take a moment, shake it out, and ask yourself, how did that feel? All right, so moving on to the next topic, now that we've refreshed midway through, the next topic is around forming a culture committee. I'd be remiss to talk about retaining and engaging remote talent without sharing Peter Drucker's famous quote, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." So if I could read the audience, I'd ask, how many of you have heard this quote before? Some of you, many of you, some hands raised virtually. So what this quote essentially means is that no matter how strong your strategic plan is, its efficacy will be held back if you don't have a strong culture. So said differently, what this quote does not mean is that strategy is not important. Strategy is very, very important. What this quote means is that culture can make your strategy even stronger. So this is why forming a culture committee who can prioritize culture at a company, especially in this remote world, is important. As we started today's conversation, we started by saying a strong sense of connection and a playful and engaged culture is a core ingredient to business success. And we believe you can't have one without the other. So forming a culture committee is a great way to create engagement from both a bottom-up and top-down perspective. A few, again, specific tips so you can walk away saying, here's what I will do to either improve or create a culture committee. The first is create clear ownership for the group. Who is the committee owner? This person is accountable for things like setting the meetings, setting the agenda and objective for the meetings, making sure that the committee has a clear mission and a clear focus. Create clear ownership for a subcommittee. So within the committee, you may decide there's certain areas that you'd like to focus on. And then lastly is when it comes to ownership and participation, encourage cross-function and cross-level participation so that voices from all angles of the organization are heard. The next tip is to gather feedback through pulse surveys. Pulse surveys are short surveys to get a pulse on a regular basis. I want to acknowledge that pulse surveys are not the same as employee engagement surveys. Pulse surveys look at specific culture-related topics and are intended to be frequent and to lead to direct action. Now, the culture committee is responsible for taking action regarding the pulse survey responses. And then we touched upon this before, but be intentional about gatherings, whether it's virtual or in person. If you have regional folks who are all in the same place, maybe encouraging monthly regional gatherings, if possible, giving people the opportunity for in-person meetings for the whole company, whether that's quarterly, or we have some of our clients who are now at a cadence of doing large company gatherings 2 times a year. Another way to be intentional about gatherings is when you have large meetings already in place, like an all-hands meeting, as an example, to weave virtual connection into those. And then the last thing, which is not listed on this slide, but I did want to tie it back to something that we do, our sister company is bread and butter, is sports leagues. So give people the option to opt in. A sports league is a great way of doing so because not everybody has to go to this in-person gathering, but people who can connect with their play personality, people who are interested in playing, it gives them an option to join the gathering. The second to last topic that we're going to cover today is creating a strong onboarding process. So on this slide, you'll see that there are various tips to make your onboarding experience and make sure it has a positive impact on new hires. The three that I want to really call out, though, are 1, match new employees with a buddy. 2, use some sort of a connection tool. We've heard great things about Donut, which connects into your Slack application if you use Slack. And 3, host a 52 connections game. This is our version of speed networking. Folks join a Zoom experience and essentially meet new people in a playful and systematic way of meeting new people. What's consistent about these that I pointed out and that you see on the slide is they're all rooted in playful connection. What you don't see here on this slide to create a strong onboarding process are things like train employee on their job function. And that's because those job-specific trainings will happen. That is what you hired this person to do. That said, the intention of this slide is to reiterate that we need to be intentional about creating connections and infusing play from day one. This next slide provides further support for why creating an onboarding program that is rooted in connection is important for retaining and engaging top talent. So what you see here is a model that was created by Greenhouse, the recruiting platform that's called the employee lifetime value. So what this chart represents is the total net value over time that an employee brings to an organization. So what you'll see here is essentially the, you can extend the employee lifetime value by investing in various points of their employment journey. Whether it's the start of their journey, the very beginning, when they're fully contributing, when they make the decision to leave, and when they exit. What I want to specifically point out is that a good onboarding experience will decrease the amount of time until they become a fully contributing member, and it increases the likeliness that this employee will stay at the firm longer. So as you can see by the shaded green area over the bottom line, by investing in onboarding, creating connection and infusing play from the very beginning, you actually have an opportunity of extending the overall output and length of an employee's journey with your company. And last, but certainly not least, I had to save the best for last because this is ZogCulture's bread and butter, is the topic of holding fun and engaging events for your remote employees. Planning events does not need to be difficult, but like a lot of what was covered in today's presentation, it does need to be intentional. So this slide has some tips on how to make your event strategy as playful and impactful as possible. And the next set of slides has some specific event ideas that you may want to consider. So the first tip is include the different play personalities. Think back to what we covered at the beginning of this presentation. Are you hosting events that are inclusive of different play personalities? Is there something for the creator? Is there something for the competitor? Is there something for the director? Is there something for the joker? Some events may cover multiple play personalities. Some events may be specific to one, and that's okay. But this next tip is create an annual events calendar. As you create the events calendar, think about how inclusive are your events to different play personalities. This next one is really interesting and really important, which is to host events during the workday. This is a trend we saw pre-COVID, but we're seeing it even more now while employees are remote. Your employees want to know their time is valued. And when working from home, when you ask someone to stay after hours while their kids need homework help or their dog needs to be walked, this may send a message to them that their time is less valued. Frankly, when folks were in the office, people may have felt that way, but they were already there, and going to a happy hour after work or going to an event may have felt a little less taxing on their time. When folks are home, it's more important than ever to respect boundaries and to invest in your people during the workday. We covered this earlier, but another tip is to offer employee-led sessions. So encouraging people to share topics that they're most interested about, asking for leaders and giving people a chance for their voice to be heard. And then lastly is work with an expert so that you, if you're the one accountable for planning events, you're the one accountable for creating an events calendar, you can actually have a good time too. You and your team can show up and play. So some specific ideas for hosting in-person events, many of which Zog does, and many of which we can recommend and or you may even be able to do on your own. But some specific ideas, when you're thinking about, well, okay, I'm going to be intentional about bringing people together for in-person events. The first is, company field days. Help people feel like a kid again and get them out on a field. Tug of war, relay races, obstacle courses, putting people on teams, you name it. Doing like a city hunt or a scavenger hunt. This is one of our more popular products as well, because people really can show up and have a chance to connect with their teams and explore. This taps into the explorer play personality. Through our sister company, Zog Sports, you may want to do a sports game, a kickball game, or a basketball game or tournament. Or you may want to give people the option to sign up for a sports team so they can play against other teams and other leagues. Maybe there's 20 people who are interested in playing a certain sport, and once a week they can get together. And then lastly, in-office team building. So bringing something to your office, like a trivia night or a cooking class or a smoothie making class or a yoga class. Now, as we look at the virtual world, the question is, what are virtual ideas? So, this purpose of today's webinar was to talk about ways to engage and retain your talent who's remote. There are amazing remote and virtual games available. So we have a bunch. This first section are the Zog ones. 52 Connections is the speed networking event I mentioned before. Our most popular game is something called Who Kidnapped My Boss? Themed trivia, scavenger hunts, musical bingo. There's lots of great ways for you to incorporate play into your virtual experiences. And then the other way to consider virtual events are, what else? Wellness classes, mixology and cooking classes, paint nights. You may say, well, we've already done a paint night at the beginning of the pandemic. But as you think about your talent, for someone who is more of a creator or an artist, this may be something that every time they do it, it's not the same because they have a different type of experience or a different option. And lastly, learning and development workshops. Some people may see learning as fun. So we have some great workshops that would be happy to share more about. So with all this said, that's the end of the presentation. And we'll move on now to any Q&A. If anyone would like to submit anything through the chat, we'd love to hear from you. Any questions about ways to incorporate play into the overall work experience? So it looks like we have one question that came through here, which is about participation in virtual experiences. This person shared that they've been doing virtual experiences and participation varies. Do we have any tips for greater participation at virtual events? The answer to this is what we typically encourage our clients to do is, one, get leadership buy-in. So if leaders are either participating in a leadership role or actively sharing that they will be there, it's often motivating for the rest of employees. So as an example, one of our most popular events, as I mentioned, is called Who Kidnapped My Boss? This is a really great game. And what's fun about it is we can actually customize the event so that the person who is kidnapped is the boss. That boss often shows up to the event, submits silly pictures, of themselves, and plays an active role in the event itself. So one way we've seen greater participation is through leadership participation. Another, like all events, whether it's virtual or in person, tip to create greater participation is to send invites out in advance. So to make sure you give people ample notice. I will say this is, again, particularly interesting for particularly important, I should say, when people are working from home, because people, for better, have a lot going on in their lives. And so giving people the chance to plan ahead if they do need to extend childcare, if it is going to be an in-person regional gathering, giving people the chance to, maybe they moved an hour and a half out of the city, or maybe they moved an hour and a half from the office, giving them the chance to prepare for their travel the way that they may have not needed to do that beforehand. Great questions coming through. So let's see. One specific about the game, which is, do you have facilitator notes on how to create and hold a Who Kidnapped the Boss game? Scott, really great question. So this is not a game. This is a game that if you do decide to play this game, we would host it for you. One thing that we provide, listen, there are great games that you can host on your own, and we're happy to share ideas for those. What Zog provides is staff and MC, the overall technology experience, so that you don't have to worry about the highly technical and nuanced facilitation of a game. So to answer the question, do we have facilitation notes on how to create and hold a Who Kidnapped My Boss game? The answer is that is something Zog would facilitate for you. Is there a way to view this again later? Thank you for asking. We're so happy that you would like to share it with others within your company. The answer to that is yes. We will be, this webinar will be recorded, and I believe MP will be sharing the recording more broadly. What is the ideal number for a culture committee? Too large sometimes brings too many opposing opinions. That's a fantastic question. And based on what we've seen across, again, internally as well as from our clients, here's my reaction and my response. One is the number of participants probably depends on the size of your organization. Two is a key ingredient, regardless of the number of employees, is having leadership. So I would recommend, as mentioned on the slide, having a clear leader of the culture committee, and then having clear subcommittee leaders as well. Because then even if more people want to opt in, they may be able to opt in to a subcommittee rather than, just kind of become this really large group, and they can be focused on a specific area. So to directly answer the question, what's the ideal number for a culture committee? What I'll share from my experience of what we've seen from our clients, I would say it's somewhere between 6 and 10 is when it's been the most effective group. But again, I want to highlight with making sure that there are clear decision makers and leaders leading the charge. Great question. What are some examples of some subcommittee names and focus areas? Also a great question. So some examples that we've seen, so certainly, some companies have a culture committee at large, and the culture committee may span various culture topics, right? Everything as wide as fun to DEI to physical workspace. And that might be an all-inclusive culture committee. If your culture committee is specifically focused on fun, some specific subcommittees might be one, just virtual connection. So that subcommittee is thinking only about virtual games and ways to connect virtually in meetings that are already happening. Another subcommittee might be in-person gatherings. So again, if you're a remote first workplace, but then you do intend to have regional gatherings and in-person gatherings, you might want to have a committee focused on what those in-person gatherings look like. And then maybe a third committee might be specifically on pulse surveys. So this committee is responsible for having an ear to the ground and gathering feedback. Let me know if that answered your question there, if you have any further questions on that. All right, it looks like we have one more question that just came through, which is how do you make your virtual events engaging? And I touched on this a bit before, but I can reiterate, and I think it's important that to us, the most important element of the Zog virtual experiences is the energy that we bring to hosting them. So our MCs, surprise and delight elements, immersive experiences, and being mindful of where people are when they participate. So if it is a much larger group, making it feel like a smaller group with things like polls or smaller breakout rooms so that people really have a chance to connect deeper. So it looks to me like those are all the questions that have come through. I'll ask if there's any other questions. Following this, we'll be sending a recap. You'll be getting some information, I believe, from MP as well as from Zog, with things like videos of some of our most popular games, a blog post about the play personalities, so you can reference that in the future. And please don't hesitate to reach out to me if you have any questions at all about play at work or any of the topics we covered today. It was a pleasure to be here with you all today, and I will, oh, hold on, it looks like we have one more question. Can you recommend engaging activities? Yes, you know, I was about to wrap it up, but this is a good question that I can't miss, which is, can you recommend engaging activities for a new hire orientation via Zoom? And the answer to that is I'm more than happy to. That's something we do a lot of. So our most popular, so what Zog offers is our most popular activity for new hire orientation is what I referenced earlier, which is called 52 Connections. We have a handful of clients who do 52 connections on a recurring basis as a way for new hires to get to know each other, but also to get to know their teams. The premise of 52 Connections, and again, we'll share a video link of this after the webinar, is folks join and then they're put into smaller breakout rooms using the prompts that we shared at the top of this meeting as a way to get to know each other. It's highly interactive, it's fast-paced, and it's like speed networking, a really, really great way for folks to get to know each other. So we've seen that, again, for companies who are hiring, 20 people a week or on a recurring basis. We have a handful of companies that have this as part of their ongoing new hire program. We also have some that have said, we've hired 15 people in the last 45 days. We'd like to do a session of this. So it really, can adapt to whatever your new hire needs are. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I will actually wrap now and pass it back over to MP. If you have any further questions, please reach out. This was very fun. And if you could see me, I'm smiling. I hope you are too. So thank you all for being here today and have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, Sam, and the entire Zog team. We really appreciate your time. The MPHR team is here to help guide your organization on any HR compliance issues. If you would like to learn more about how we can assist your organization, please visit our website to set up a short 15-minute call. Be sure to join us next week on the same day and time for our webinar on FMLA, mental health, and state leave programs, key updates for 2022. Visit our website to register and to see the full calendar of upcoming events and available resources. We will be sending out a recording of today's webinar along with the presentation slides this afternoon. Thanks for joining us and have a terrific day.